Welcome to Save As Ability, a podcast to educate and inform you about disability employment issues. My name is David D'Arcangelo, and I'm your disability policy expert.
Hey everybody, welcome back for another episode of Save As Ability. And we continue to grow. It's great. Thank you. So if you continue to help us out though with subscribing, liking, comment, sharing, it really does help us keep great content flowing for you. And today we have great content. We have a great guest, Bob Ludke. Welcome, Bob.
Thank you, David. It's a pleasure to be here. I'm really excited for this.
Well, it's great to have you. And we're just coming off of some of our ADA anniversary episodes. I thought it'd be appropriate to have you. You're a disability champion. You've been on a number of sides of disability inclusion from the government, and now you're doing a private thing. You've written a book. So we can talk a little bit about all those things. And I just wanted to thank you because, again, I know you value, through your organization, value inclusion, just how important it is to make sure that people with disabilities are represented throughout all aspects of life. So maybe you can start with telling our audience a little bit about you and some of the things you're doing.
Sure. I was born with a disability. I was born with a dislocated right hip. So for all of the listeners out there that have seen Forrest Gump, hey, remember in the early scenes, he's wearing those leather boots with the metal rod between them. I had to do the same thing. And so I've always had a bit of mobility limitations in my leg and in my lower back. But I haven't, it hasn't been to the last few years that I've really come to grips with that disability. And it frankly has been my growing interactions with the disability movement that's really given me the level of comfort, frankly, to talk about that, to identify as being disabled. And so I struggled a long time in that journey, but have really come to appreciate that journey now, thanks to a lot of people that I've met along the way.
Well, thanks for disclosing that and identifying yourself. I hadn't known that. So, but I think every time it's very personal, but every time that's done, I think people with similar circumstances can now relate to that and say, well, wait a minute, this guy has done it. He's successful. So thanks for doing that.
Yeah. And that's something that, in the last few years that I've really come to appreciate, is just talking about disability. And I'm sure we'll get to this a little bit later in the conversation, but a lot of times when I'm doing consulting work with organizations, people come up to me and say, oh boy, this is going to be so hard to create a more inclusive company. Like what do we do? And I said, you know what? The first thing you do is you just talk about it. Even if you don't identify as disabled, just give people the space to talk about it, to identify however they feel comfortable identifying or not, or talk about their connection to disability. Because when you do that, you create space for everyone to frankly bring their best, most authentic selves to the organization or to their community, whatever it is.
Sure. And there's a reality behind that, right? I mean, for years, the stigma around disability was not a positive one in terms of like overall society, right? I think that's starting to change, but there's still a ways to go.
There is. And I think someone like me is, how do I say this? What I struggled with the most is for all my life, like I knew that I had a physical limitation, right? But I would look at those who were using assistive devices, right? Using walkers, wheelchairs, what have you. And I would look at that and I'd say, well, my mobility isn't the greatest, but it's certainly not that. So how can I claim to be disabled when I don't look at my disability as something that's really, really impacting my life? But now that I've taken the time to look back at my life, I realize how much it did impact me, even though you may not, if you would look at me, David, if you and I'd be standing next to each other in a conversation, you couldn't tell. But it's something that I've had to work really hard to overcome. And as we have just talked about, I'm learning more and more that just sharing that journey helps others feel more comfortable sharing that journey, because I think there's a lot of people that are in the same, kind of that same trajectory that I'm in, that I know that they have a disability, but for whatever reason, don't feel comfortable talking about it, not because they're ashamed about it, but just they don't know how they fit into the conversation. And so,
That's right.
I've been told, like, if the more I talk about it, the more I give others the ability to talk about theirs as well.
I think that's right, Bob. And what we say around here all the time is we're all in various states of ability.
That's true.
Right.
That's very true.
All right, well, let's get into value inclusion and Ludke Consulting and your book and all the other great things that you're doing to improve access to opportunities for people with disabilities.
Yeah. So you mentioned before that I have a bit of background in policy, and my first real job in life was as a summer intern for then Senator Tom Harkin from the great state of Iowa, which is where I grew up. And not only did I intern for Tom, I had the opportunity to be an intern on the subcommittee for disability policy when there was such a thing. And it was shortly after the ADA was signed into law. So it was what I would argue the more impactful aspect of the bill, right, is the implementation of the bill. Like, how do you interpret the law? How do you make it work? And so that work, I think, was harder than the actual writing of the bill, because you had to make it work. And there was a lot of nuance. There was a lot of gray. And so it was a really fascinating insight, especially for a young person, into government. And so a few years later, I had the opportunity to work on Tom's staff for a number of years, that had some other opportunities working for both the House of Representatives and the Senate. And, one thing led to another. I then developed a career in corporate governance, corporate sustainability, responsible investing best practices. And that's when I started my consultancy, Ludke Consulting. But during the pandemic, I realized that, in the midst of the summer of 2020, right, we were still dealing with the pandemic. We were dealing with the aftermath of George Floyd's murder. All these companies stepped up to talk about, to make commitments about how they were going to better engage in society. But disability was left out of those commitments, out of that conversation. And so I went back to the Harkin Institute, which Tom founded when he retired from the Senate, and proposed a paper looking at how you can use responsible investing to advance this competitive integrated employment in the private sector. And that's what kind of started this journey for me of really trying to make the business case for disability employment.
Right. And I think back to those times that you're talking about with Lex Friedman, Bobby Silverstein, all those guys, and then also like Senator Dole. I mean, I think one of the reasons the ADA has worked and stayed around so well is because it was really a bipartisan law. President Bush embraced it. The administration embraced it. And then 10 years later, the George W. Bush signed the Amendments Act, right, that really did a lot of the implementation that you referred to. So give us a little bit of the sense of where we are now, though, with disability employment. I want to ask you a little bit about your feelings there, because to me, it's all about, there's two things: labor participation first, and then getting people employed.
Yeah, I mean, if you would, I think, talk to anyone who was involved in the ADA or the after measures of the ADA, and I know for a fact, Tom Harkin says this all the time. His biggest frustration with the ADA is that it didn't do enough to advance competitive integrated employment for persons with disabilities. And that continues to be a challenge today. And I think we're at a point where, and this has been a premise of some of my research, where, and the advocates of the ADA will say this, right, that the ADA set the floor. Right. It set the minimum level of expectations. What we have to do now is go beyond that floor. And I really think that the policies are in place to go beyond the floor, but now we have to work more collaboratively across the private sector, across the investor community, to really help them understand the value proposition of hiring this very, very uniquely talented group of people who have, and this is what I wrote a lot about in my book, who spend their entire lives innovating, right? So they are
Problem solving, yes.
problem solving. They have incredible amounts of resilience, right? So those are all the traits you want in an employee. Those are all the traits if you're an investor and you're investing in a startup, those are the people you want to invest in.
We talk about it all the time, whether it's the Randy Lewis Walgreens report or the Accenture report or disability all of it indicates that people with disabilities are going to be some of your best employees.
Right. And too often it just, we say that we think about loyalty and job tenure, but it goes so much beyond that. It's the innovative spirit, as we said, the problem solving, the willingness to collaborate, the willingness to really focus on the culture of an organization. And those are all things that too often get swept under the rug. And yet those are the traits that the really advanced leading companies, the successful companies embrace.
Yes.
And so we need to share that value proposition more widely. And if there's anything that the book can do, case studies and disability-driven innovation, I hope it's that.
Great. Well, yeah, I really believe that we're coming back, just like the ADA, there was a large level of collaboration then, bipartisanship, and then we got away from that. I really see America as a country getting back to that. How do you feel about it?
I'm not quite as optimistic. What I feel is that too many people in too many organizations have gotten too caught up in all the machinations going on in Washington, D.C.
Yes.
Right. They've gotten consumed by the craziness that is Washington, D.C. and all these executive orders.
And that government is like the source of everything.
The government is source of everything.
Just...
And look, I'll be honest, there's a lot of red and yellow warning lights flashing, right? And repealing some aspects of the interpretations of the ADA is very concerning. Having said that, what I keep telling, especially private sector organizations, is there are so many things in your control that have nothing to do with an executive order.
That's right.
For example, go out in your community and build some relationships with organizations that source disabled talent and find new pipelines of bringing more people into your job. You don't need an executive order to do that.
It's the first question I ask when I'm talking to a corporate partner is, so tell me about your relationships with the VR community or with the fill in the blank community. And if they don't have good answers, it's like,
it's hollow. Those commitments are hollow. Have you gone through, and I had this conversation a couple of weeks ago with a client. Have you just gone through your vendor RFP process and actually looked at all the forms that they have to fill out? And do you need all of those? And when I said, are they accessible? And I don't mean like visually accessible. Of course you need that too, but
are they usable? Is it practical in a business sense? Yeah.
Right. Have you yourself filled out that form to see, is it burdensome or is it fairly straightforward? Because those are the kinds of things where so many people, I don't care if you have a disability or not, get discouraged. And therefore, like your vendors tend to be the same vendors time and time again.
Right.
So there's a lot that can be done that doesn't have anything to do, again, with the craziness of what's going on in Washington, D.C.
Right. All right. Well, Bob, as we begin to conclude here, tell our audience how they can get involved with you or whatever it is you want to do to promote access to opportunities for people with disabilities, really.
Well, so that's a great question. And I guess what I would welcome are maybe three things. One is, please connect with me on LinkedIn. I've built a lot of wonderful relationships on LinkedIn and actually have created a group on LinkedIn that's focused on disability-driven innovation. And I would love to keep adding people to that group. Second would be, please read my book, Case Studies in Disability-Driven Innovation, and then reach out to me and let's have a conversation about that. And are there things in the book that resonated? Are there things in the book that gave you a bit of pause that maybe I didn't hit the mark on? I would love to learn more about that. And then third, I'd be willing to, I'm always willing to come into organizations and, have an in-person meeting, have a webinar, give a keynote to, as David, you said a few times here, like spread the word and really get people to understand the value proposition of what we've talked about throughout this conversation.
All right. Well, I appreciate that. I do the same thing. I give away so many services for free.
That's
I'm sure
true.
you do
I
the
do.
same thing, Bob.
I give a lot, but you know what? It's if there's one type of service to give away for
That's
one
right.
subject, this is it.
That's right.
Because it can really, it has this sharing what we have talked about really has a force multiplier effect. I am dead certain on that.
It
And I
absolutely
believe that
does.
to the
And I think people with disabilities, and we're like an example of this. You're a Democrat, I'm a Republican, but we're here together because we're trying to advance this. We're trying to collaborate. We're trying to find consensus. And I think people with disabilities and these issues can help lead the way out of the challenges that we've got. So I appreciate you, Bob. Thanks for coming on.
My pleasure, David. Thank you.
All right. Well, send us those links. We'll be sure to put them in the description. And for everybody who's watching and listening, we appreciate you. It's David Darkangelo, another episode of Save Visibility. And I hope you have a great day.
For more information about disability employment issues, please visit our website, disabilityemploymentsolutions.com. The Save As Ability podcast is available on Apple Podcast, Spotify, our YouTube channel at Disability Policy Expert, or wherever you stream your podcasts. Subscribe, stream, rate, and review our shows. Your ratings and reviews help our show reach new audiences. Produced by Pod Pro Entertainment. Save As Ability lives within a network of podcasts located at podproentertainment.com. #TheNewRadio. Again, my name is David Darkangelo, and I'm your disability policy expert. Until next time, thank you. I hope you have a great day.